Hi there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to yet another cracking installment of the Matt Brown Show. This is the Built in California series, and with me on the line is an incredible founder doing amazing things in an industry I, up until a few weeks ago, knew zero about. But, but her name is Tamara Leigh. She is the founder of EIO Diagnostics. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Matt. Appreciate it.
The privilege is all mine. Really it is. There's lots that we're going to get into today. I think it's a really, really interesting problem that you guys are solving in a very, very cool, sexy way. So why don't you kick us off, Tamara? Give us the backstory to you, your journalism, all that kind of stuff, and how you got to where you are today in terms of like being CEO and doing what you're doing.
My story. We're going to start there.
Yeah.
Sure. I think also, Matt, that's the first time anybody's called this a sexy method of detecting mastitis. So thanks. All right. So my name is Tamara Leigh. I'm the CEO and co-founder of EIO Diagnostics. I'm one of three original co-founders. So our technology was actually born in a barn on Vancouver Island with a goat dairy farmer and cheesemaker who really had retired from the tech industry. And so he started looking for a better way to detect mastitis in his dairy animals and came up with this genius idea. So we paired up with another co-founder who led on the product side and had been active in startups before. And I came in to put the agriculture in the ag tech company. So prior to doing this, I'd spent 15 years working in agriculture, really from barn to boardroom, helping farmers out with diversification or market launches, working on the policy side or with government. And my real passion was doing science communications and helping do that knowledge transfer from research onto farms. And little did I know I would end up in the thick of it with EIO Diagnostics.
Clearly, yes. And so, yes, I got schooled on mastitis in a major way when we first met. So I know a lot of my audience, like, what the hell is that? I kind of heard about that once before when my wife was pregnant. But what is mastitis? Like, talk to us about the problem. What is it? How big is this problem?
Yeah. Okay. So mastitis is an infection of the mammary glands, so the milk producing tissues. And for cows, it affects all mammals, like you said. It affects humans, it affects dogs, it affects pigs, it affects cows. And cows are super athletes of lactation. They're putting out between 65 and 100 pounds of milk a day. So when you have inflammation in the milk producing tissues, if you have breast inflammation, if you will, for cows, it can be really painful. It also can affect the quality of the milk. And definitely affects the lifetime productivity of the cow. So there's the animal health component of it. There's a food quality component of it. And then there's also that piece of it that is sustainability and profitability for the farmers.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the things I didn't realize actually was how massive a problem this actually is. So if you were to put a dollar value on this, like, well, how many cows does this actually affect? And what is the economic impact of mastitis on production, milk production, things like that?
Yeah. So let's start really big. The dairy industry is a $900 billion a year industry, right? And that's fueled by 250 million dairy cows in production worldwide. Now, for mastitis, 1 in 3 dairy cows will experience a mastitis infection within a lactation cycle. So that's basically a year. Sometimes it'll be a full severe case. Sometimes it'll be a very mild case and will self-cure. But 1 in 3 cows. In the US, that impact is $2 billion a year in losses in the US dairy industry. And globally, it's $20 to $38 billion a year.
So why now? Like, why hasn't someone come along? If clearly this is such a big problem, why are you guys the ones to solve this problem? Like, surely someone was like, yo, like, mastitis is a thing, 20 to 30 billion, 2 billion a year, like, these are big numbers. They're not small. It's not a small problem. So one would imagine, that someone would come along and solve this. So why not? And why is your team the ones, tackling this head on?
Right. So it's not that mastitis has been ignored as a problem. In fact, mastitis does draw a lot of attention. And there are veterinarians who have, spent their entire careers working in this space trying to manage mastitis. Why us and now? EIO Diagnostics is taking an entirely different approach to mastitis detection. So instead of looking at the cow or the milk for signs of infection, and touching them directly, what we're able to do is use infrared sensors and AI to look for signs of inflammation in the udder optically, so without touching the cow or the milk. So right now, in a large-scale dairy farm, and honestly, a lot of the smaller scale farms as well, the standard protocol for looking for mastitis is manually testing each teat and spraying milk on the floor and looking for signs of clots or flakes. And then they go, whoa, okay, we see a problem. Well, that is a problem because it's already a severe enough infection that it's affecting the quality of the milk and over time, the lifetime productivity of the cow. What we're able to do by looking at a thermal image of the udder is to see early onset or early indicators of inflammation and to flag that with the farmer so that we're not touching the cow, we're not touching the milk, and we can look for early indications and get ahead of the infection.
So obviously you're solving a mastitis problem, but it sounds to me like this is actually a labor problem that you're solving, because I don't. My sense would be that there's not a lot of labor available. You want to like kind of do this manual checking of like cows as they're coming past. If you have 1,000 cows on a farm, that's a lot of checking every day. It's quite a unique job for quite a specialist individual. So, I mean, obviously you're solving a mastitis problem, but this is a labor issue too.
It is very much, and a lot of farms right now are running tight margins. That it's hard to find staff. I mean, your coffee shop is keeping tighter hours. Your restaurant's closing 2 days a week instead of one. Everybody's having this labor crunch. But like you said, Matt, it's a really highly skilled job to be able to make a super quick judgment call as these cows go by. It's a super repetitive job, so people don't necessarily want to do it for all that long. And it's really error prone. If you're doing an 8 or 10 or 12-hour shift, and that's your job, you might be really good at detecting mastitis for the first 2 hours, but by hour 8, everything looks the same. So we're able to take technology and an optical sensor and give the same analysis to the cows every milking. And it doesn't matter if you're the first cow through the parlor or the last cow through the parlor, every cow gets seen the same.
So when you are on, like, how big is a typical dairy farm? Like, what is the average population of cows, say, on a typical, dairy farm?
Yeah, so I think the average herd size in the US is around 400 right now. But what we're seeing across definitely the American dairy industry is a lot of consolidation. So the farm sizes are getting bigger and bigger. That means more and more cows are going through the dairy at any given point. So the dairies we work with have something called a rotary parlor. And if you think of it like a cow carousel, the cows come up a loading chute and they get into a stall onto a rotating platform. And while they're on the platform, and they kind of like being there because they get FaceTime with their friends and they, can chill out and relax. But while they're on the platform, they get cleaned, they get inspected, they get milked, and then they'll be sorted out for any treatment that they need afterwards. So that's kind of a central point. They come on, they're on the rotary for maybe 8 minutes, and then they're gone again, and they go on with their day. Those dairies tend to be larger. So they're going to be definitely north of 500 cows. Typically, the dairies we're working with are 1,000 cows to 10,000 cows. So that's a lot of cows to be seen during a milking cycle. And that's where you get the real economies for us. Because what we're doing is a database solution. Like, we're using big data to solve a dairy problem right now. So we needed to work with big dairies to get the data sets that we needed for our solution. Once we get those big data solutions working with the larger farms, then we can start taking those models and using them for smaller farms. My North Star here is to be able to come up with a handheld device that can be used by any farmer anywhere in the world to be able to help address animal health issues and productivity.
So I'm curious to just get a sense, and I'm sure our audience is also, is like, if you have 10,000, cows on a farm, like that's a big enterprise farm, how many people or labor, like what kind of staff complement would be looking and checking for mastitis manually, typically on a farm of that size?
Yeah. So a dairy running 10,000 cows is going to have 5 or 6 people on the rotary at any given time. Probably, two, like there's one person who does the force stripping. And in a 10,000 cow configuration, they'll have a couple of people who will switch off so that they can do different jobs and fight the fatigue and the repetition.
Right. So let's talk about your products. Obviously, we're talking computer vision here. We're talking AI. This is about accurate diagnostic of mastitis symptoms in cows, as an example. So how does the technology actually work?
Right. So it's about accurate detection right now. What we're doing when we look at that minimum viable product and the labor replacement is we're saying we can tell you which cows you need to look at, and then the farmers follow up with the cows, and they do a diagnostic test to see whether it's a bacterial culture or somatic cell count or whatever follow up testing they're going to do before they treat the cows or deal with them in other ways. So we're doing the detection. Now, how that works is that we have a sensor package. It's about half the size of a shoebox that sits on a pole at the more or less the beginning of the rotary. So after the cow's udder is cleaned, but before the milking equipment goes on, the cow moves past our camera and we collect that image. And then we run that through our algorithms to be able to detect whether or not there are inflammation issues. And then here's the real sweet spot: is we can give basically a real-time marking of that cow so that they know which cows are sick and they can follow up. And then we take the data and we put it into their herd management softwares, which are like cow CRMs, and and then they can see over time which cows have been sick either that day or over the week or over the month, or an individual cow over her lifetime, and they can make other decisions about how they're managing either their dairy broadly or that cow individually.
This is why I do that show, or this show, because then you figure out that there's a new type of CRM called a cow CRM.
Exactly.
That's
It's
so
a really
fascinating.
competitive space, actually, if you really want to know.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, this is it. I mean, there's a whole conversation we're going to have now about the industry more broadly, because it's very curious. When I reached out to you and you're like, "Yeah, I'm doing all this awesome stuff," I was like, "Holy shit! Like, this is really remarkable stuff." I mean, solving a huge problem. So I want to park that and just maybe stick with the product a bit more. So you guys are doing like 3 levels of detection, right? Or 3 algorithms or something like that. So is this a unit that you provide for free, or is this something that the farmer has to pay for? What are they paying for exactly?
Yeah, so we don't sell the equipment, but we do charge for the installation and the training fee. And so so they pay $25,000 up front, and that gets the unit installed. And there's a bunch of, infrastructure and things that go on behind that. And then the integrations with their systems. So we have to push and pull data. We go in with our models, but we fine tune our models then once we're installed, so that they become more accurate and more specific to that herd. So in some ways, we're training our model on their herd, and at the same time, we're training them on our model. So we go through a period of collecting the data, making sure that we're confident in our analysis, giving them daily reports, and then we start activating our cow marker solution, which is what actually shows them in real time what's going on, and then integrating with other things. So, I mean, talk about technology. We have the cow CRMs. That's one piece of it, but they also have all sorts of automations in dairies, things like automated cow sorters. So when the cows come out, or automated sorting gates. So when the cows come off of the rotary, they go, hey, they walk through and there's an RFID tag, and it says that cow needs to be sorted for a health issue. And then she moves off to a paddock and is dealt with that way. So, there are a lot of integrations and moving parts on a dairy right now.
Mm-hmm. So, if you think about the data that you guys are basically creating for the dairy industry, Where do you see this all going? Because obviously, you're doing the detection piece, but really you're a data play that provides intelligence to farmers around mastitis, but I'm sure that there's probably extensions into other things. What do you see as the vision for EIO Diagnostics?
The vision for a computer vision company? Who knew? It's, well, you talk about the need to collect novel data, or the amount of data that we are collecting, and that really for us was a big piece. You can't go out and find or download a custom data set or a stock data set, sorry, on the internet. It's not like optical character recognition. So what we are compiling in our data sets on these cows and udder health is truly unique. And we'll have, I think, a lot more depth to it and value to it the more we collect and the more we dig into it. Because sometimes you collect something and you don't realize what you're going to get until you have it and you start parsing it in different ways. So from a sheer data play perspective, I think we're going to learn to understand the value of what we're doing over time as we get deeper into it. The most immediate thing that we're doing is, of course, the mastitis detection, but we also have other opportunities to look at different aspects of animal health while we're in the dairy. So once our sensors are there, we can look at other health issues that are related to dairy cows. We can take that same technology or sensor configuration, and we can play it in other parlor formats. So there are rotary dairies, which are that carousel that I was talking about. There's something called a parallel or a herringbone dairy that runs cows down a chute on two sides of basically a trench where the workers are situated for milking. And there are robotic milking stalls, which are fully automated, really cool technology, where the cows just decide that it's time to get milked, and they walk in and they get a treat and they get milked and then they leave and it's all good. So all of those play a role. And so for us, expanding out into each of those configurations is going to be a big deal. Then we look at other dairy species. So cows are big, but we started on goats and we'll return to goats. There are just as many water buffalo in dairy production in India as there are cows, because there are fewer restrictions culturally on what you can do with a water buffalo than what you can do with a cow. So water buffalo, goats, sheep are milked. I got an inquiry once from Sudan, where there are 6 million dairy camels in production. So I mean, not a major use or a major focus, but it is surprising how much is out there in the dairy world. And then we can look at other livestock with this technology as well, and solve problems in other livestock species. And so that's kind of where we're going from a technology standpoint, and taking this out to the world. Where we go with that data piece, though, that's going to be really rich.
Yeah, I know, exactly. It's like, what business are you really in? Yeah, so yes, you're solving a mastitis thing, but actually you're really a data business. And then, it's amazing. I think, like, once you get the data and you're able to build models and get the science around the models right, then it's like basically anyone's your customer, from the farms themselves, the private sector, to other companies who are providing services to those farms, governments, It's huge. It's a really massive space, and I'm always very interested to ask the question, like, what business are you really in? Because when you can connect all the dots past the initial use case, then suddenly the value of what you're doing becomes really, really clear, not only to your initial use case customers, but to investors, and then by extension, the markets that serve those customers too.
So I'll get you talking at the next investor pitch, Matt.
I'm there. We're doing it. Curious though, how accurate is this? How accurate is it?
Right. So we're still working on the exact statistics. What we found with our trials to date is that we are as accurate as a manual milker. So that runs about 70% accuracy in being able to identify mastitic cows at any given point. And what we're looking at is really increasing the consistency. So we can, if we're seeing 70% of the cows and they're seeing 70% of the cows, then we can do this all the time, every day, all day. And then what we can do is integrate other data points into our algorithms so that we can refine that even further. So really, within the next few months, we expect to be pushing 90% on our accuracy rate.
Wouldn't surprise me, not if you've got AI and ML crunching all the data, right? It's just going to get better. So it's how it goes. It'll always get more efficient.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about the industry. So I spoke to you about this because, and obviously you come from a journalistic background and so you've been covering the industry for many years. And from the outside, when people buy like a gallon of milk, they don't like fully appreciate like what actually happened or transpired to get that gallon of milk. You know what I mean? Like on the shelf. And what's striking for me is actually how innovative certain parts of the supply chain in the dairy industry actually are. You are an example of that. John Deere is an example of that. And there are many other companies, fertilizer companies, Omnia, I spoke to you about. But from your perspective, having been in the space for so long, where is this industry going from a technology and innovation perspective? How innovative is it today? And where do you see that trend, like the use of technology, such as yours, like the ones that you guys have developed? Do you see this being an evolving, constantly evolving industry?
Super evolving and quickly, actually. So from when we started the company in late 2017 till now, just the prevalence and adoption of technology in the dairy industry has really accelerated. And it's a dairy in particular, and I think part of it is a function of the intensity of dairy operations, and people are looking for efficiencies, and no farmer wants to get up at 3 o'clock every morning, or few farmers want to get up at 3 o'clock every morning to milk. It's a naturally innovative space, and there's reasonably strong economics behind that. So we see things like the herd management systems, the automated sorting gates, the different styles of milking parlors that increase the automation abilities. There are automated cleaning technologies, teat dip technologies, different chemical preparations to help with hygiene and encourage health. There are all kinds of things that are happening on the logistics and supply chain side as the milk leaves the farm. The testing, the diagnostics. There are things like boluses that cows are telling you, or that can tell farmers what the cow's gut health is. All kinds of wearables for cows. So you have a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, and they're walking around with a neck collar and an activity monitor, and you can see that the cow's not moving as much, or not ingesting as much, or not ruminating as much. All of these are technologies that are currently at play in the agriculture sector. So it's really exciting for farmers, and as well in the computer vision space. There's companies like Canthus, and here's a really huge piece. Is the environmental side. So anaerobic digesters are being installed on a lot of dairies, because it allows the farms to collect their manure and then capture the gases off of it and use that as a way of generating energy. And then they get the outputs, like having sterile bedding that they can use and recycle through. Speaking of recycling, water recycling is a huge piece, and anybody in California understands the value of water recycling right now. Dairy is very water intensive, and so being able to do a couple of things. One is to reuse that water or use it very effectively, and then also to recover the nutrients, because often the water is used in cleaning. There's manure, and so we have all kinds of like phosphate issues or nitrate issues, or fertilizer issues, and it's possible to recover a lot of those things either through the digester process or through water recycling processes. There's another great Canadian-founded company actually called Livestock Water Recycling, and they're out there doing really good work in the industry. So, agriculture, and animal agriculture in particular, understands that, we're the largest footprint human activity on the planet. And so we have a responsibility to take action on environmental sustainability issues and those kinds of things. But agricultural production is shaped by and a function of human settlement. Agriculture is what made human civilization possible. And then it becomes a circular loop. So we have these huge cities and high concentrations and demand for high value goods and all of these things. And that forces the hand on agricultural production methods. So farmers are really, really savvy. They know that they have a responsibility to care for their animals and to care for the planet. And technology plays a huge role in those responsibilities.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, I didn't even know half that stuff was actually going on. I mean, I can imagine like drone. I know there's one founder, a friend of mine. The company is called EIO Robotics.
Mm-hmm.
So they basically, yeah, it's crazy. So like they fly up drones and they basically scan your crop. And then what they do is they use your sort of technology, computer vision, and then they model and predict the crop like forecast or production outputs. But more importantly, they can predict risk. So they then marry the weather data. And so, over time, they can then predict, well, is this crop going to fail or yield below a certain threshold? And so then that affects, margins and so on and so forth. It's fascinating. But from the outside, you're just drinking milk, but you don't actually, do you know what I'm saying? Like it's this massive paradigm shift from like what consumers think is going on, because that's like you said, it's like there's a farmer and he walks out and he gets up at 3 a.m. to milk the cows, and that's how you get your milk. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a lot of unknown knowledge about the space from a consumerism perspective.
Yeah, absolutely, and a lot of misconceptions as well and misunderstandings of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. So. What would you want consumers to know about this space? Like you obviously know the space very well. You're doing something truly innovative. What is like your message to consumers about sustainability, for instance, as it relates to agriculture? Like what is something that, it's like, I know this to be true. Matt Brown and probably 95% of his audience don't. Here's what it is. What is that thing?
Yeah. The stereotype that I fight the most often in the industry is that farmers are extractive. They're taking the land for granted, or they're taking, their livestock for granted, and it's an extractive industry. And the agriculture industry invests a lot. They invest a lot in their technology, improving their farm practices, taking care of their animals, making sure that their land is enriched and bringing it back, that there is no farmer, whether they're in crops or livestock, that benefits from a purely extractive mindset. And that they're out there working with us a really focused and personal investment in sustainability and welfare for all of us.
What's the relationship or the response been like from incumbents in the space? So when you go and you talk to a potential partner or even a venture capitalist, what is the sort of immediate, knee-jerk response when you tell them, look, we do this thing and we do it really well? What has the response been like from incumbents?
Right. So people are looking for a solution. At the beginning of the conversation, we talked about, mastitis is a persistent issue. Since people have been milking cows, there has been mastitis. And veterinarians there's a whole area of specialization in mastitis that is global. But the farmers are looking for a better solution. The veterinarians are looking for a better solution. The treatment providers are looking for earlier indications so that they can provide better treatments. And the strategic partners, even the pharmaceutical companies or the suppliers, they're all involved and invested in finding a better solution. So people are leaning in. They really want to know what we're doing, and they want to know that it works and explore the possibilities of it. And even from a venture capital perspective, when you explain the size of the market, and that's probably the biggest barrier, first and foremost, is that if you're talking to somebody outside of agriculture, they don't get how big the possibility is, right? So if you explain the size of the market and how what we're doing is applying basically deep tech to dairy, they go, oh, okay, and they can lean in and see. So we have all of this med tech that is incredibly similar to what we're doing, right? And if we can make that connection, they go, right. Within the ag tech space, yeah, they want to see us do it. They want to see the traction and the product market fit. And that's been something that's been relatively easy for us to get because people want the solution.
Mm-hmm. So are you guys at product market fit? Sounds like you are. Are you there now? And what is your kind of next step around next funding round to kind of take what you guys have done to the market at scale?
Right. So I would say, yes, we have strong product market fit. What we're doing right now is taking on early customers. So we have, we're working with two rotaries in South Kansas. We've just signed our first rotary in Wisconsin, which is like the dairy heartland for the United States. We're bringing in partners in Minnesota and, focusing as well in California in the Central Valley. I mean, there's 1.2 million dairy cows or something in the Central Valley of California. That's a lot of lot of cows. So we're working to bring on early customers. And then what was the rest of the question? Where do we go from here?
Yeah.
Fundraising. That's what you were asking. What? I never think about fundraising.
Really?
No, it's teasing. Yeah. So where we are, we're really, building up that customer traction so that we can launch a more significant raise. We're raising it about $2.5 million in Q4 this year. So it's time to really ramp this up and take it out to the world. That takes some resources and expanding our team.
Well, hopefully this interview will help you do that. It's great. I mean, how liquid is this space? I mean, from an investment perspective, obviously you're at the coalface of it. I mean, you talk to investors, you've already raised money, you're going into a future raise and probably another raise, and so forth. Startups are always in fundraising mode. But how liquid is this actual space from a VC investment perspective for startups?
It's been growing. So there are a handful of big funds that will fund ag tech and who will look at livestock ag technology. So there's a little bit of a disconnect between what happens in terms of, crop technology, tons of appetite for that. The plant-based meat thing had its moment in the sun for sure, might come back. New food products and processing technologies, that's definitely a huge space. Livestock lags a little bit. And I always say it's, from my perspective, cows are messy and they move. So they're much less predictable than crop-based technology.
Yeah.
But, there's a lot of interest. People are seeing the connection between agriculture, food production, climate, and the environment. And recognizing that there's a tremendous opportunity there. So, I mean, it's a growing space for sure. And the other thing that's come along is the number of micro funds and the way that impact investors are looking at agriculture. So it's hitting in a lot of different check boxes.
And I actually Googled how much money is going into ag tech. So here's the actual number. This is from 2021. It was $5 billion went into the sector, 440 funding deals to VC-backed startups. And that number is growing every year. In fact, from 2020 to 2021, it grew by like 40%. There's a lot of movement in this space. It's a lot of movement in the space, right? And this is something that as I go, like I said earlier, like consumers don't fully appreciate it, like just how much innovation is going into food supply chain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it needs to.
Yeah, absolutely. Partnerships. So partnerships in this space is going to be quite important, I would imagine, for you. How do you see, as the CEO, the role of partnerships in really solving this problem of mastitis for the agricultural industry?
Yeah. When I've conceptualized this business, it had to be a part of a partnership network. A farm doesn't stand alone. And it has a whole network of suppliers that need to work with it. Farmers have a ton of data coming from different data channels. So for us, getting to the farm is done through partnerships, building relationships with other companies or other farm suppliers and getting the introductions. And we need to be able to work with other companies and technologies on the farm. So yeah, partnerships are huge. And the other piece for us is, you might imagine the agriculture industry is pretty dispersed. You have a distance to go from dairy farm to dairy farm. We could spend a fortune just putting together a service community, or like a service network, to back up our technology, or we could work in partnership. So it's, everything from, sales and distribution, to service, to, and even on the R&D side, what we do and what our core business has been built off of is peer-reviewed research. And so essentially we're commercializing something we know is scientifically possible. But if we want to deepen those data sets, if we want to really make this sing, we need research and development partners. And primary research is incredibly expensive, especially in the livestock space. So there are people there. This is really an ecosystem-based approach in business.
Who's leading the research space? Who's the partner? Like if you were to say, I want to go, if we could work with anyone or these three companies, like from an R&D perspective, like who would that partner be? What would they look like?
It depends on what aspect of research we're doing. When we start talking about advancing the actual diagnostic capacity of what we're doing, there's nobody better to work with than the companies that are developing the treatments, because they're the ones who are going to be developing or doing challenge studies with specific pathogens. So one of the things about mastitis that makes it such a weird problem to kind of solve and so hard to pin down is that it's caused by multiple pathogens, and sometimes it's environmental, and sometimes it's contagious, and sometimes it's, so we can say mastitis, it's about inflammation, but what is Staph aureus or Strep uberis or E. coli, or, and you break it all down. If we want to map those reactions and see how that develops through infrared imaging, we need to work with organizations like, Zoetis or Boehringer Ingelheim, or, like the big veterinary farming groups or universities, to be able to do those studies and pull it off, pull together the data set and do the analysis at that level.
I think you're a med tech company. You know what I mean?
Med tech for cows.
That, yeah, exactly. Like that's actually what it is. Like, not, because it's like, yes, you're doing the mastitis thing, but like if you think, go back to the thing around the data, all the data that you'll be getting, as you said, if you're able to map like the individual cows, then at scale, against particular pathogens and close that loop, like that's massive. Like that hasn't even been solved before, right?
Right. That'd be really new.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's, step by step. Like as a startup, we have to be able to get to market and generate some revenue. That's where we start with labor replacement. We say, okay, there's this big labor issue for a specific configuration of dairies, and we can help with that, right? There's value there. But it's what are we going to do with the data, and how are we going to increase our value over time? And that's where we need, the data, we need the partnerships, we need that analysis, and we need to build it out. But yeah, essentially, this is medtech for dairy.
It's crazy. See, you heard it first on the Matt Brown Show.
They are.
So I'd love to talk about the journey that you've been on now as CEO. So obviously what you're doing is not easy. If you think about AI and ML and crunching computer vision and these sort of technologies, like we all know about them, we all hear about them, but we don't fully appreciate, I think, as a community of visionaries or a community of startups and founders. In other words, like if you haven't actually played with it, like you don't get it. So like how hard has this actually been to solve for you guys as a team?
It's funny because I'm not a technical founder, right? I put the ag in the ag tech company. So it's been a lot harder for me than it would be for someone else. Now, the trick is with the recruitment, and building the team. And like I said, establishing the data set. We had to put a lot of time, effort, and money into collecting our own data, which meant our hardware had to be solid, and all of the data collection infrastructure there, so that we could even start the process of training models. So it's been a really interesting lift. Once we have the data, once we have the information flow and the infrastructure, information wise, then running the models, doing the analysis, building that piece out, seems and talk to me in 6 months, but seems now to have a lot more momentum. The real uphill battle was being able to get to this point where we can collect the data, so we can do the analysis and the model development.
Yeah. So if I gave you a time machine tomorrow, and I said, here's the Matt Brown Show time machine, in you get, go back to day one, literally when you were like, vision, this is the vision that I have for this company, and you could go back to yourself back then. What advice would you give yourself about building this company? That like if I'd known on day one, it would have actually made my journey as Tamara, the CEO, a little bit easier, a little bit better.
Yeah. It all has to do with team, and focusing on our team and building the right skill sets, and staying super focused. And I think that I'm the second CEO, so I call myself the execution CEO. I'm like, well, we had the shiny baby moment with the startup, and that's fun. That's where you can say, hey, look, here's the dream and the moon and the stars, and people go, yeah, that's great. Somebody else got to do that piece. I took on EIO Diagnostics when it was past that. It was sort of an awkward toddler, and we've moved through that, but through all of it, it's really about focus on execution, and putting together a team that can execute and execute reliably, because you waste a lot of time either with the wrong people in the wrong roles, or chasing after 1,000 little dreams. Somebody said to me, we were in the Techstars Farm to Fork accelerator in 2018, and I had this great dream of being able to do both the large scale ag version of what we're doing now, and the handheld version, simultaneously. I was like, yeah, but the fundamentals of the system are the same. And somebody said, you can't do two things at the same time with a startup. I was like, watch me. And we're doing one thing. So you have to do one thing right in one place, in one market, and you can build from there. So I guess there's a handful of lessons in there. The team, the focus on execution, and just really being dialed in and focused on one piece, because you can't spread yourself too thin.
That's the problem when you're a visionary, right? Is that everything is shiny and new, especially when you're dabbling with things like computer vision and AI and stuff like this. It's like, well, we could do this and we could do that, and there's a use case for this and there's a use case for that. And then you meet with an investor and he says, yeah, but have you considered that? Now that's shiny. Or you meet with a partner, and suddenly it's like everything is just like cool and sexy. It is sexy, by the way. And I think as visionaries, I have this problem. My wife's always given me trouble about it. She's like, yo, like, Matt, just do one thing, like do the one thing and do that one thing, scale that one thing, the one use case, like solve the minimum problem first, and then figure out, like, go there later. But it's quite easy to to be romanced by the opportunity, and not to really be pragmatic enough to solve the use case that can really get you the traction that you need to cross the chasm, so to speak.
Yeah, especially when you're working in a space like this that is really complicated. Building our hardware and our sensor was complicated. Putting sensitive electronics in a commercial dairy is brutal. It's like you might as well unleash it in a war zone. It's bad, you don't want to, so we had tons of hardware stuff to sort through. We had to make it dairy proof. We had to work through all the infrastructure. We had to, like, there's so many moving parts to this. Sometimes I wish I'd done a meditation app, but not that doesn't have its own challenges.
No. Don't do that. No, don't do that. Do what you're doing.
Yeah. It's fun, and there's impact. And what lights me up is, it comes back to that piece about being able to work with farmers, to work with livestock, to make a meaningful contribution to something that I think is just absolutely foundational to human existence. You can never get bored working in agriculture. I've always said you never starve working in agriculture either. But.
Yeah, exactly. As I keep saying this, it keeps from the outside, you just don't think that it would be a great space to go. But then when you go there, like as you know, I speak to founders all the time, and I think of all the founders I've spoken to, and I mean, like pretty much all of them are doing something with AI or computer vision, something like this. But I think the industry itself and the opportunity to really contribute to humanity in what you're doing in agriculture is like, from a contribution perspective, it's truly like the leverage on that is huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Tamara, why do you do what you do? What gets you out of bed in the morning?
A certain kind of masochism, Matt. Isn't that the founder answer? No, it is. I'm driven by the people, and I'm driven by the vision. So I have a responsibility to my original co-founder, Corey, who came up with this on his farm and for his goats. I have a responsibility to every member of my team along the way who has put in their 2 cents and their expertise or their effort. I have a responsibility to my investors who bought the dream and the vision and then came back for the restart and helped us really pick up and move forward with it. And I do this all out of a sense of responsibility to the animals that commit their life to service, whether voluntary or involuntary. These animals are in service to humans, and we have a responsibility to them, the farmers who are doing the food production, and to our community. So that's, I come to this from a place of service, and I want to have a solution that can actually make this problem better.
Mm-hmm. Tamara Leigh, amazing story, amazing startup. Really excited to see where you guys go. Is there anything my community or audience can help you with?
I always have 2 asks. If you know a farmer in the dairy industry who might be interested in talking to us, we love talking to farmers. Even if their answer is no, we want to talk to them and learn more about the problems that they have and the possibilities that they see. And the other piece is always investment. So, investors who are interested in making an impact in animal welfare, in sustainable agriculture, and innovation in this space.
Tamara, thanks for being on the show. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Matt. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Ciao, ciao.